The ancient oak doors of the Apostolic Palace closed with a resonant thud, a sound only the Vatican could conjure. Solemn, heavy, unyielding. Beyond those walls, the words spoken would remain veiled, perhaps for days, perhaps forever. Pope Leo XIV, barely 2 weeks into his pontificate, had called for a private audience, not with world leaders, not with the Curia's power brokers, not even with his closest advisors, but with one man, Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. When Tagle stepped across the threshold, it wasn't merely a meeting of two clerics. It was something denser, something urgent, something alive with unspoken weight. No cameras captured it. No communiques were issued. No scribes took notes. Only silence prevailed. And in Rome, silence is never empty. It hums with purpose. Outside, the press corps buzzed with restless speculation. The Vatican's press office offered a single, austere line. The Holy Father received His Eminence Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle in a private audience. That was all. Yet for those attuned to the Church's subtle rhythms, its veiled signals, that lone sentence was a paradox, revealing everything and nothing at once. In an institution where protocol reigns supreme, this encounter defied every norm. Its abrupt timing, its cloaked nature, the absence of even a single papal aid. Why now? Why so swiftly? And what, if anything, was set in motion behind those sealed doors? To grasp the gravity of this moment, you must first know the men at its heart. Pope Leo XIV, born Robert Francis Provost, is the first American to wear the papal mantle. His life traces a winding path, from Chicago's urban sprawl to the rugged missions of Peru, then to the labyrinthine corridors of the Roman Curia. A missionary by calling, a scholar by training, he is a man of profound stillness, his presence marked by an intense, disciplined quiet. He is no performer, no politician. He is a shepherd, not a showman, a pastor whose silences speak louder than his words. Cardinal Tagle, by contrast, is a living flame. Known as the Asian Francis, he carries the aspirations of millions, particularly in the global South. A bridge between the Church's ancient roots and its modern reach, he was once a front-runner for the papacy. When the conclave chose another, many assumed he would fade into the shadows. He didn't. Something greater was stirring. The timing of this meeting was no coincidence. It followed closely on the heels of Pope Leo's inaugural address, where he called for a church that listens before it leads, a church that kneels before it commands. Yet here he was, not consulting diplomats or entrenched clergy, but Tagle, the man many saw as his rival, the man who embodies a vision of the Church that Leo has not yet publicly championed. This wasn't politics, it was purpose. Inside that chamber, no microphones hummed, no pens scratched. Two men sat face to face, and the world waited, oblivious to the weight of what was unfolding. For the faithful, this was no routine Vatican affair. It was a moment history conceals in its quietest, most transformative chapters, for the Church's great shifts begin not with fanfare, but with a murmur. And this murmur carried the weight of destiny. What elevates this beyond a fleeting headline is what it signifies. The Church is not a corporation. It doesn't pivot with press releases or rebrand with slogans. It moves with intention, with prayer, with the slow, deliberate rhythm of divine purpose. When a pope and a cardinal of Tagle's stature meet in utter secrecy at the dawn of a new papacy, you don't need their words to feel the tremor. Something is coming, something vast, something profound. Whispers circulate in the corridors of Rome. Will Tagle be named prefect of a powerful dicastery? Will he lead a bold new mission to rekindle the Church's global witness? Is Pope Leo, known for his steady, unflashy leadership, quietly assembling not a cabinet of bureaucrats, but a fellowship of prophets? The deeper truth lies not in titles or assignments, but in trust. Trust between two shepherds who have spent their lives listening to the cries the Church too often ignores. The scene feels almost scripted. The heavy doors, the silent nod, the absence of spectacle. But it's more than theater. It's strategy. A chess move in a game far grander than earthly power. Pope Leo XIV didn't ascend to the chair of Peter to rearrange desks or polish the Vatican's image. He came to restore credibility, to rebuild a church battered by division, scandal, and drift. And credibility begins not with pronouncements, but with character. That's why this moment resonates. When men like Leo and Tagle meet in silence, it's not merely a new phase in leadership. It's a dialogue about the Church's soul, a conversation that reaches beyond the marble halls of Rome to the hearts of the faithful worldwide. For years, Catholics have watched the Church grapple with internal strife, moral failures, and a growing sense of irrelevance. Some have walked away in disillusionment. Others remain, praying in quiet hope for a voice that speaks with truth rather than polish, with conviction rather than compromise. This meeting might be the answer to that prayer, or the first stirrings of one. Why the secrecy? Why the absence of fanfare or follow-up? Because true discernment doesn't crave applause. It demands space, stillness, a clearing where the Spirit can speak. In a world addicted to instant answers and viral moments, Pope Leo's silence is a radical act. He's not chasing headlines or curating a public persona. He's pursuing something deeper, something eternal. If Tagle is part of that vision, this isn't a political alliance, it's a prophetic one, a partnership rooted not in ambition, but in a shared sense of mission. As the world spins theories and the media churns out speculation, one truth stands firm. The Church is in motion, not in the loud, measurable ways the world demands, but in the slow, sacred ways heaven ordains. Those doors closed in Rome, and their echo is already reverberating through the Church's spirit. Because sometimes the most vital conversations aren't broadcast. They're whispered between two men who believe the Spirit leads best when we listen more than we speak. This moment matters not for what was said, but for who was there, who was listening. History doesn't always begin with a trumpet blast. Sometimes it starts with a door softly closing, with a silence that speaks louder than words. Walk into many churches today, especially in the once thriving parishes of Europe and North America, and you'll hear a silence that drowns out the liturgy. Not the reverent silence of prayer, but the aching kind. Empty pews, walls that once vibrated with choral harmonies now echoing absence. This isn't rebellion, it's erosion, slow, relentless, and devastating. It's not solely the fault of scandals, though they've left deep wounds. It's not merely a story of failure, though failures abound. It's something more profound, more spiritual, harder to name. Forgetfulness. A forgetting of why the Church matters, why its altars burn with eternal fire. This forgetfulness grows each time a child skips Mass, each time a grandparent prays for an unbaptized grandchild, each time faith is reduced to vague values or being a good person. The pews aren't empty because people are angry. They're empty because people have stopped remembering what those pews were for in the first place. Pope Leo XIV knows this. Cardinal Tagle knows this. Their clandestine meeting raised no eyebrows among those who feel the Church's faltering pulse. It was inevitable, a moment born of necessity. Both men have witnessed the hemorrhage firsthand. In the Philippines, Tagle has seen a once vibrant Catholic culture bend under the weight of modernity's allure. In Peru, Leo baptized children whose parents drifted from the old devotions, their faith diluted by the pull of a secular world. In America, confessionals gather dust while yoga studios multiply. This decline is not confined to one region. It's global, a slow bleed that stains the Church's fabric. In Germany, more people have formally left the Church in the past 2 years than in any recorded period. In France, once the eldest daughter of the Church, weekly mass attendance languishes below 5%. In the United States, even among those who still identify as Catholic, only a third believe in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, a core doctrine, a foundational truth. The sacraments are still offered, but fewer come to receive them. Worse than the numbers is the numbness, the quiet resignation in parents' eyes as their adult children abandon faith, the priests preaching to half-empty pews, the bishops praying for vocations that arrive in trickles, if at all. The Church is bleeding, and few dare to name it aloud, not for lack of care, but for lack of solutions. Apathy, not atheism, has become the greatest spiritual crisis of our time. But Leo XIV was not elected to manage decline, to preside over a shrinking institution. Nor has Tagle ever been a bishop content with the status quo. Their meeting was no formality. It was a summons, a reckoning, a strategic move in a spiritual war that few acknowledge but all feel. What was said behind those doors may never be revealed, but the urgency is etched into the stones of every crumbling cathedral, every shuttered seminary, every grandmother lighting candles alone while her children sleep through Sunday. The decline isn't just about scandals, though they shattered trust. It's not just about modern culture, though its noise seduces. It's about a loss of conviction, a failure to speak with the fire that once set hearts ablaze. A generation raised to be nice and follow your truth has no framework for sacrifice, for suffering offered up, for a Eucharist that demands your entire life. The Church stopped preaching fire, and in its place, a polite fog settled. Safe, therapeutic, spiritually sterile. This is what Leo sees, what Tagle weeps over. Their alliance matters because they understand that the battle isn't about reorganizing structures or tweaking policies. It's about the soul of the Church, the soul of the next generation, the soul of a world forgetting that eternity exists. There is no program that will save the Church, no slick campaign or rebranding effort that can revive what's been lost. Only one thing will suffice: holiness. Real, radiant holiness. The kind that makes people uncomfortable, that demands repentance, transformation, and awe, that smells of incense and tears. Imagine the conversations happening now, in rooms without cameras, between leaders who still believe prayer can change the world. Imagine a pope who begins reform not by issuing edicts, but by sitting with the one man many thought would wear the white cassock. Imagine what it means that their first public step was not a grand proclamation, but a meeting no one was supposed to notice. Why the secrecy? Because this isn't about headlines. It's about resurrection. The real question isn't why the Church is in decline. We know the answer. It's whether this decline is the end or the beginning of something deeper. Can empty pews become places of encounter again? Can forgotten churches echo with songs once more? Can a weary world rediscover that behind the veil of bread and wine, God still waits? Leo and Tagle seem to believe so. If holiness still has power, if prayer still shakes the earth, then perhaps this moment of bleeding is not death. It's pruning, it's purification, it's preparation. The door closed. The Church stood silent. But maybe, just maybe, Heaven is still speaking. Are we listening? The contrast between the two men is striking, yet their complementarity is what makes this moment potent. Pope Leo XIV wore an austere intensity, his words measured, his emotions veiled. His background, Augustinian, missionary, theological, suggests a man more at home in silence than in the spotlight. Those who know him speak of his relentless commitment to reform, not the loud kind that generates buzz, but the quiet kind that reorients systems, reawakens duties, and restores trust. He sees the Church not as a stage, but as a vineyard, one that requires patience, pruning, and care through long seasons of drought. Tagle, on the other hand, is raw, unguarded. When he speaks, it's from the gut, the heart, the wound. His voice trembles when he recounts the pain of migrants. His eyes glisten when he speaks of abandoned children. He doesn't hide emotion. He makes it the message. Some mistake this for fragility, but those who've seen his impact know better. From Manila to refugee camps, he draws crowds not with polish, but with presence, embodying the vulnerable, bleeding heart of the gospel. At first glance, they seem opposites, but the Church doesn't advance through uniformity. It thrives through harmony. Leo doesn't need another strategist at his side. He needs a heart that beats where his mind calculates. Tagle doesn't need a platform. He needs a partner who knows that leadership often happens in the shadows, where tears are shed and decisions are prayed through in silence. Together, they model something countercultural. Leadership that listens before it speaks, that breaks before it builds. Their meeting sent ripples not for what was announced, but for what was felt. It was different. It was divinely timed, as if God, amid cultural unraveling and spiritual fatigue, is weaving a new kind of leadership, one shaped not by charisma, but by character, not by power, but by prayer. What will come of this alliance? No one knows yet. Perhaps new roles for Tagle, perhaps quiet reforms, perhaps something deeper, a shift in the Church's tone, its Ian priorities, its presence. But what's clear is that Leo and Tagle are not building a brand. They're building a bridge, a path back to the Church's heart. In an age of outrage and spectacle, where bishops spar on social media and Catholics pick sides like partisans, these two are not waging war on the culture. They're waging war for souls. They're not symbols for factions, but shepherds for a scattered flock. Their mission isn't to win arguments, but to win hearts, to remind a weary world that the Church is not a museum of traditions, but a living body, wounded yet alive. The global divide within the Church only sharpens the stakes. In the North, cathedrals stand grand but empty. In the South, pews overflow with faithful who walk hours to Mass. In Germany, thousands renounce their faith annually. In Nigeria, families trek through dust to worship. In Paris, churches close. In the Philippines, Tagle's homilies move crowds to tears. This isn't just demographics, it's a spiritual chasm. The North, once the engine of missionary zeal, grows tired, intellectual, detached. The South burns with need, with faith forged in hardship. Leo, shaped by Peru's peripheries, and Tagle, born of the Philippines' vibrant soul, embody this tension. Their collaboration could bridge it, not by erasing differences but by harmonizing them. For too long, Rome has governed from the center, treating the South as a mission field rather than a source of wisdom. But what if the North needs the South's fire? What if the future of the Church lies not in Europe's fading embers, but in the South's blazing hearths? Leo seems to grasp this in a way few popes have. His first moves weren't to the power centers of the West, but to voices from the margins. Calling Tagle wasn't a gesture. It was a signal that the cries from Manila, Lagos, and Bogota are not echoes, but starting points. Tagle has long been that voice on the edges, weeping for the suffering he knows not from reports, but from back alleys and refugee camps. Until now, he was beloved, but peripheral. That may be changing. Their alliance isn't flashy. It doesn't need to be. It's foundational, a shift not in policies, but in priorities. If they lead together, not as power brokers, but as pastors, the Church might remember what it's meant to be. A universal body, not a fractured institution. The danger remains. If the North clings to control and the South is merely tolerated, the divide will widen. If the global South is seen only as a recipient of aid, not a wellspring of renewal, the Church will lose its balance. This is the fork in the road. Leo knows it. Tagle lives it. The rest of us are watching to see if Rome will finally listen to the edges, if voices like Tagle's will shape the future, if the Church will not just talk about synodality, but embody it. Because in the South, faith is not theory. It's bread, battle, bomb. If the North listens, not out of pity, but out of awe, something extraordinary could begin. A church led not by geography, but by grace, not by tradition alone, but by testimony. This moment feels like hope, not the loud, sentimental kind, but the real kind, the kind that creeps in like dawn after a long night. It's the hope that the Church, weary of itself, is being reawakened, not through thunder, but through two men behind a door, with no audience but God. The question isn't whether the Church has drifted. It has. The question is whether we'll notice the distance before the pews are entirely empty, before the altars grow cold. The sacred began to feel ordinary when liturgy became routine, when the Eucharist ceased to stir trembling, when priests became managers and holiness was traded for efficiency. Worst of all, it began when kneeling felt optional, not essential. Leo isn't preaching this aloud. He doesn't need to. His silence says enough. His choice of Tagle says more. He's not building around power, but around presence, not around management, but around mercy. Tagle has spoken of the managerial temptation, a subtle drift where order overshadows awe, where structures harden into bureaucracy. Jesus didn't manage people. He met them, touched them, healed them, one soul at a time. The Church has the tools, but what it's lacked is heart. Leo and Tagle see this. Their alliance isn't about numbers, but names. Names known and loved by God, written on hearts, not spreadsheets. The Church's power never came from mimicry of the world's methods. It came from martyrdom, sacraments, saints, the whispered prayers of the faithful. It rose not through efficiency, but through fidelity. Now, in this hour of reckoning, the way forward is back. Back to the altar. Back to confession. Back to the sacred stillness where God speaks in whispers. The Church is not a corporation. It is the body of Christ. If parts of that body are numb, we must ask, when did we stop letting the head lead? When did mystery give way to meetings? When did prayer become performance? The way back is through sanctity, and Leo's quiet revolution, with Tagle at his side, signals that return. This is your Church, not just theirs. The battle for its future isn't fought in Rome alone, but in homes, in hearts, in the choices of the faithful. Will you pray like the future depends on it? Will you act, serve, repent, believe, not later, but now? The Church that is coming will not be safe. It will be sacred. And if you want to be ready, listen to the silence. Something is changing. Watch closely.